All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome on a beautiful Saturday. So we're grateful for the weather. I'm Jean Morrison. I'm the University Provost and Chief Academic Officer, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today as we mark this special moment for the BU School of Law, for Dean Onwuachi Willig, and for scholarship in an incredibly important and timely area. I also want to extend particular thanks to Rothgallow and Ernest Gallo for their wonderful generosity and friendship to the university in making all of this possible today. Ryan's and Ernest's support over the years, especially with this most recent gift, has enabled many important advances at BU, improving the quality of research and scholarship our talented faculty produce and the caliber of the experience we offer to students at all levels. The Ryan Rothgallow and Ernest J. Gallo Professorship is the latest example of this ongoing support and casts a necessary light on the important and intersecting issues of critical race theory, feminist scholars, and the law. There are important topics of study, and none of us can think of a more talented and energetic and well-positioned recipient for this professorship than Dean Onwuachi Willig, who is doing truly trailblazing work in critical race theory, racial and gender inequality, and anti-discrimination law. A good research university produces scholarship and solutions that answer the demands that society sets for us. But a great research university defines the future. A great university acts as the engine of thought and innovation that produces fundamental new knowledge to transform society and improve the quality of life for populations around the world. This endowed professorship is an example of what makes BU a great research university. By explicitly investing in and committing to the work that will ultimately lead to a more just and fair society. We are grateful to Ryan and Ernest for this generous and important gift and are thankful to have such a preeminent scholar in Dean Onwuachi Willig to serve as the inaugural recipient of this professorship. And now to share a little bit more about the meaning of this gift for our institution, it's my pleasure to introduce President Robert A. Brown. Bob?
Masks and glasses were not made to be with each other. But we're getting used to it, right? It really is a pleasure to be here today and to express the gratitude of the entire Boston University community and my very personal appreciation to Ryan and Ernest for this most recent gift, which makes possible really a transformational professorship. When you look at steadfast supporters of the university and look over time, Ryan and Ernest really epitomize what that means. The steady stream of generosity and engagement started with Ryan right after she came out of graduation with law school and then accelerated over the last decade. Ryan and Ernest have been early supporters, and I think early is a key word, catalytic supporters of a number of key initiatives, including the law school renovation project, which we enjoy today, and also Innovate at BU, where it's become the hub of innovation for our students across the university. By their gifts, they've helped raise the quality and stature of Boston University, and I think they've demonstrated a keen understanding of what research universities are all about, their constituencies, their students, the faculty, and the staff, and the engagement with the alumni, and I'm deeply appreciative of that. They also recognize that endowed professorships are vital as we continue to raise the quality of the university over time. It is the means by which we're able to recruit and support some of our most accomplished scholars and researchers. And as an institution, we have many more scholars and researchers that in other institutions would deserve an endowed professorship than we have professorships for. During our first campaign, one of our pride and joys is we were able to raise 58 new fully endowed full professorships. In that context, the word transformational is probably not overused. We have much more to do, but it's a great start. And I know Angela and her colleagues hope to add a number of other endowed professorships in the School of Law. So those in the audience, consider yourself Mirandized. We have a case study for you. You know, as they do this, they'll be really building on an incredible foundation in the School of Law, because our faculty here are consistently ranked among the top in the Princeton Review of Best Professors list. You know, and I think when we go through Alumni Weekend and people talk about the impact of their law education, I've always heard alumni talk with great affection about the professors they had and the impact those individuals had on their professional life and their personal life going forward. The other thing to recognize is the university has a way of honoring in a very systematic way our best teachers called the Metcalf Awards. That's the highest teaching honor in the university, and tomorrow at the 2020 ceremony for the commencement ceremony for the graduates of 2020, we will a bit late, 15 months, honor the Metcalf winners from 2020. It's based in part on student input and faculty input. I'm proud to say that tomorrow, and it's well known that Sarah Sherman Stokes will win the Metcalf Cup and Prize as a law faculty, and join Naomi Mann, Gary Lawson, and David Walker, who are also recent awardees from the School of Law. It's an interesting fact that if you go back, the law faculty and the Metcalf Award are joined in the inaugural year of the Metcalf Awards, 1974, when Paul Wallace was the awardee. So, you know, what I'd say is this rhythm of great teaching runs deep in the law school, and it's something I think all of us are very, very proud of. You'll hear more from others, as Jean started mentioning, about Dean Onwuachi Willig's leadership and scholarship, and how she is actually the perfect scholar and leader for our law school at this very challenging time in our history, and the perfect person to hold the inaugural holder of the Gallo Professorship, which bears directly on issues of race and gender in American society. I know that Ernest and Ryan are very excited about having her in that position and how it'll translate into tangible output and impact both at BU and outside. I wanted to mention one other thing that Dean Onwuachi Willig has done, which shows her commitment to law education and to the faculty. She is the founder of the Lucy A. Little Black Woman Law Dean's Faculty Workshop, which will be celebrating its 15th year anniversary in 2022, and will be actually hosted here, right, Angela? Since the founding of the Lucy Little Workshop, participants have published more than 700 articles, 40 book chapters, and 30 books, all focused on scholarship and issues around gender and race and success in law faculty. Additionally, dozens of workshop participants have earned tenure at major universities, and others have been promoted or demoted, depending on your perspective, into administrative positions, including nearly 30 law deans and positions as low as vice provost, provost, and president. So it has been an incredibly influential act, and it really is a sign of the dedication that Angela has to the profession and to the advancement of young faculty in the profession, and her passion for helping others. And so I think it's very important to talk about that. Angela, congratulations for this very well-earned honor of this professorship, and thank you again, Ryan and Ernes, for your enduring generosity and commitment to the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce Ryan Rothgallow. She's a great, don't get up yet, I have a lot to say. She's a great friend of the university whose generosity, along with that of her husband Ernest, and devotion to the law and to values that have defined her career have made this morning possible. She's a vice chair of the Board of Trustees, where she's served since September 2015. She's also a member of the Law Dean's Advisory Board, the International Advisory Board, and the Innovate External Advisory Board. Ryan is a graduate of the BU School of Law. She received her BA in Classical Studies from Stanford University before coming to BU and earning her law degree magna cum laude in 1999. Ryan went on to serve as a member of the litigation practice group at Paul Hastings before leaving the firm in 2003 to pursue a solo practice that's now predominantly pro bono and focused on assisting nonprofits in the education, art, and social services sectors. As many of us know, Ryan is also a gifted artist, working primarily in acrylic, oil, and mixed media collage on canvas, and she serves as a trustee of the Gallo Center for the Arts in Northern California. Her husband, Ernes, who has also been a wonderful longtime friend to the university, is president and CEO of Gallo Winery, the world's largest private winery based in Modesto, California. Everyone, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ryan Rothgallow.
Thank you, Provost Morrison, President Brown, honored guests, and my beloved husband of nearly 20 years, Ernest Gallo. And congratulations, Dean Angela. You are the epitome of all that we could desire in a leader, scholar, and teacher to hold this professorship. Your brilliance, your dedication, your compassion, and your passion for the mission of the law school and the success of all who work and learn here bring honor, pride, and joy to the entire institution and to me personally. Many people have asked me what inspired Ernest and I to make this gift to Boston University and to the Boston University School of Law. Inspiration is a mysterious process. So what inspired this gift? Well, as a well-trained lawyer and a lover of words, I always find it hard to respond to questions with short answers. So bear with me for a few hours. Just kidding, a few minutes. The Oxford English Dictionary defines inspiration as the process of being mentally stimulated to do or feel something, especially to do something creative, and alternatively, a sudden, brilliant, creative, or timely idea. And the feeling that led to this gift was love. A love of three things. First, a love of Boston University. It was at the Boston University School of Law that my mind and habits were molded, shaped, and honed, giving me the tools I needed to become a successful lawyer, thinker, problem solver, counselor, and advocate. It is a love that continues to grow and evolve as a member of the Dean's Advisory Board to the law school and as a trustee. So, what inspired this gift? Well, secondly, a love of all humanity, and particularly the humanity of those like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tatiana Jefferson, Stephon Clark, Philando Castile, Elijah McClain, Sun Chung Park, Hyun Jung Grant, Sun Cha Kim, Young Ai Yu, Shou Jae Tan, Freddie Gray, Dayo Fung, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Andres Guardado, Eric Salgado, Andy Lopez, and countless others, many of whose names we will never know. And finally, a love of our children, Gloria and Ernest, and of the generations of children to come. I hope for an end to racism and for a legal system that provides equal justice for all. Though it pains me to admit it, I know it is not likely that I will see this in my lifetime. That said, in the words of the writer Marilyn McIntyre, we are here for only a short part of a long process, but to see history and our own lives in terms of a deep, dynamic coalescence, and our participation in that dynamic, our work, it matters. Like the artisans who worked on the great Gothic cathedrals in Europe. Think of Notre Dame de Chartres and Sainte-Chapelle. They must have known that they would never see these finished masterpieces, and yet they toiled for their entire lives, creating their pieces of them. And today, millions tour and photograph and worship in their finished creations. I believe that the same outcome can be achieved in our country, and in our world, in the context of the causes of racial justice, civil rights, human rights, and criminal justice reform. So long as we continue to invest in the scholarship and leadership that makes this kind of change possible. So, what inspired this gift? To quote one of my favorite saints, Saint Therese of Lisieux, also known as the Little Flower, love. Love, in fact, is the vocation which includes all others. It's a universe of its own, comprising all time and space. It is eternal. While, like many of you here, my professional vocation is the law, my life and soul vocation is love. Today, as we celebrate the investiture of Dean Angela Onwuachi Willig, who I happen to know is a big fan of love and music, I'm hoping to stir up within each of you a spark of the inspiration that Ernest and I felt when we were called to make this gift. And I find there's nothing like music to stir up the soul, so I'm going to share a song with you. Congratulations and thank you, Dean Angela Onwuachi Willig, on this day of your investiture as the Ryan Roth Gallo and Ernest J. Gallo Professor at the Boston University School of Law. It is an absolute honor that your chair bears our names.
Thank you, Ryan. And now, to introduce our inaugural Ryan Roth Gallo and Ernest J. Gallo Professor, Angela Onwuachi Willig, it's my pleasure to welcome to the podium Co-Dean and Professor of Law at Rutgers Law School, Kimberly Mutcherson. Dean Mutcherson is a nationally respected scholar in reproductive justice whose work focuses on issues of bioethics, health law, and family, and in particular, assisted reproduction, abortion, disability, and medical decision-making for pregnant women and children. Her edited volume, Feminist Judgments, Reproductive Justice Rewritten, was released by Cambridge University Press in 2020. This year, she received the Association of American Law Schools' inaugural Impact Award as a co-founder of the Law Dean's Anti-Racist Clearinghouse Project, which she worked with Dean Onwuachi Willig. Dean Mutcherson received her BA from the University of Pennsylvania and her JD from Columbia Law School. Prior to joining the faculty at Rutgers, she was a consulting attorney at the Center for Reproductive Law and Policy, now the Center for Reproductive Rights, and a staff attorney at the HIV Law Project. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Kimberly Mutcherson to the podium and to Boston University. Welcome.
So if you think glasses and a mask is hard, try it with earrings as well. It's been quite an experience. Good morning to all of you. It is an incredible honor for me to be here today, and really just a thrill to be able to be with all of you. Now, part of that is because I got to do so much work on the train yesterday, got to sleep by myself in a hotel room last night. But it's also just really thrilling to be here to celebrate the incomparable Dean Angela Onwuachi Willig, who is so deserving of all of the well-earned accolades that come her way. So because I know her well, I am going to drop the formality for a bit and of titles and just call her Angela. So when Angela asked me to introduce her for this event some months ago, I was deeply honored, but also a little shocked. Shocked because I felt like there must be someone better than me to do this job, and honored because she thought highly enough of me to ask me not just to be here, but to be the one to introduce her on this auspicious occasion. And because it's such an honor, I had a really unusual amount of trouble putting together this introduction, which is odd for me because I have literally done hundreds of introductions since I became a legal academic. So I decided that what would make this easier was if I started by talking about Angela the person before I talk about Angela the professor, the dean, and the rock star scholar. Sometimes in life, you might be lucky enough to get in on the ground floor of a person's rise to greatness. And that's how I feel about my friendship with Angela. My first clear recollection of meeting Angela was at a LACRIC conference in 2004 in Malvern, Pennsylvania. Why? Where we were both really early in our careers in academia. I'd been at Rutgers for only about 2 years and was still very much trying to find my way as an academic, a job that I had never aspired to and somehow ended up in, which I know is true of Angela as well. I basically knew no one at the conference, and I was incredibly intimidated by everyone who was there and spent an enormous amount of time trying to make myself as small as possible so that people wouldn't notice me. But at some point, Angela and I fell into a conversation, and I started to feel a little bit less like an interloper. She was friendly, funny, warm, and of course, incredibly smart. And she had an intensity about her that was palpable, but not in a way that felt overbearing or intimidating. As we were talking, it became very clear to me that Angela was a person with good energy. And the new age part of me, of my personality, gets really invested in people with good energy. So I decided that she was a person who I wanted to be around and to learn from, and ultimately force her to be my friend. So fast forward through the years, and our paths continued to cross, and I got to revel in her success as she built and then cemented her reputation as a prominent critical race theorist, shaped from the mold of Derek Bell, Kim Crenshaw, and the other originators of CRT. I got to celebrate as she won awards like the Derek Bell Award from the American Association of Law Schools Minority Group section, which is given to a junior faculty member who, through activism, mentoring, teaching, and scholarship, has made an extraordinary contribution to legal education, the legal system, or social justice. And then some years later, she won the Clyde Ferguson Award, also from the AALS Minority Group section. And this is given to an outstanding law teacher who in the course of her career has achieved excellence in public service, teaching, and scholarship, and is particularly aimed at professors who have provided support, encouragement, and mentoring to colleagues, students, and aspiring legal educators. She, by the way, was the first person to win both of the section's awards, one for senior faculty and then one for junior faculty. She's written and edited books published by prestigious presses. She's published an amazing number of law review articles and has delivered dozens of named and invited lectures. She's written amicus briefs. She's offered testimony to Congress and state legislatures about the importance of the Crown Act, a piece of legislation that protects Black women and others from discrimination in the workplace based on their natural hairstyles. She's an elected member of the American Law Institute, an elected fellow of the American Bar Foundation, and was recently elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She has won numerous awards for teaching and scholarship. She's appeared on multiple lists of power lawyers, extraordinary women, and more. And I could go on listing her accomplishments and accolades. Her CV is 30 plus pages, if you're wondering. But I want to discuss what I have long admired most about Angela. What makes me look up to her and aspire to her level of greatness is that she is an academic activist in the best way possible. She uses the stature, power, and gravitas that comes with being a law professor, not simply to engage in theoretical debates with other law professors, but to think deeply and seriously about the law and its consequences for marginalized people in this country, especially Black and brown people. And beyond that, to contemplate how we can make law better so that our society and our world can be better. Beyond being a prolific and powerful scholar, she's a committed mentor, a listening ear, a champion for other women in legal academia, a booster for students of color, and a place of refuge in the legal academy where so many of us still do not feel welcome. She literally creates spaces where women of color can flourish. And as Bob talked about earlier, in 2007, she founded the Ludi A. Lytle Black Women's Law Faculty Workshop as an opportunity for mentoring and fellowship for current and aspiring women of color faculty. And over the 15 plus years that Ludi has been happening, there have been thousands of articles, books, book chapters, and those of us who unfortunately fell into administration. Angela is a living embodiment of one of my very favorite quotes from Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, someone with whom you are probably very familiar, who has said of her role as a Black woman in Congress, quote, "I'm not here just to occupy space, I'm here to create it," end quote. Angela doesn't just occupy space in legal academia. She is making a way for all of the women, people of color, and women of color who see her success and think to themselves, maybe that's something that I can do. Her work demands that people think critically about the law's supposed neutrality and consider how they benefit from systems created before any of us were born. Her unwillingness to force herself to fit into a box that was never meant for someone of her race or gender to occupy is an example that inspires others, including me, to do the same. She is building a legacy that will bear fruit for decades to come. And as someone who is now a dean, I have an even deeper appreciation for the work that Angela does. And I have been incredibly lucky to have her friendship and guidance during the tumultuous times that we have been living through since early 2020, when a global pandemic uprooted all of our lives, and then the murder of George Floyd reignited fires that have always been burning in this country. Angela, for obvious reasons, has been a vital player over the last several months, as many law schools and law school leaders in particular have tried to respond to the urgency of the moment. Like many of the over 24 Black woman law deans at American law schools right now, an all-time high, as you could have guessed, Angela is keenly aware of the contradictions of her role. In a message to the BU law community in the days after George Floyd's murder, she wrote, quote, "As a Black woman and dean of a law school, the first dean of color at Boston University School of Law, I struggled with what message I should send to my students. I even wondered if I could send a message about the deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and Tony McDade, imagining the backlash when certain words come out of my Black mouth. I listened to friends and spoke with other Black women deans who felt equally silenced, all of us still cautioning each other against speaking out through a public message. All of us knew we could and would act more freely were we not Black. Perhaps surprising to some of you, racism regularly disempowers the seemingly powerful dean. And yet, if we feel powerless, imagine what it feels like for those not so economically or professionally privileged," end quote. And so she wrote poignantly about her pain and fear as a Black mother to Black children, and in a profound act of vulnerability and leadership, she shared those emotions with her students and with this law school community. And that choice brings me back to the idea of what it means to be an academic activist, a person who writes and speaks truth to power, a person who takes risks because she knows that she can afford to do so when others cannot, a person who refuses to be cowed into silence about the injustices that surround us in this country, a person who undoubtedly is inspiring so many others to commit themselves to living with integrity and using their law degrees in service to the cause of justice in ways big and small. I can think of few people who are as richly deserving of the honor of being the inaugural Ryan Rothgallow and Ernest J. Gallo Professor here at BU. I'm awed by the vision and generosity of Ryan and Ernest in creating this position at a time when the backlash and fear about having frank conversations about race is so painfully playing out in our nation's schools. But I could not be more thrilled to see this kind of support for CRT in general and for Angela in particular. Polly Murray once said that true community is based on equality, mutuality, and reciprocity. It affirms the richness of individual diversity as well as the common human ties that bind us together. Angela, through her leadership, her advocacy, her scholarship, and her example, helps to build the kind of communities that will move us into a brighter future, where equality is a reality and not just an aspiration. She is truly the best of us, and I envy you that you get to have her as your dean, and I am very grateful that I get to call her my friend. Thank you again for letting me participate in today's ceremony. Well, now that I'm fully in tears, okay. Thank you for those beautiful words, everyone, for your beautiful words. Really touched by them, and so I will make it through my speech. It will not go the way I planned it, I'm sure. So good morning, welcome everyone. It's really a delight to see all of your warm and smiling faces, and even if they are behind masks. I want to start by thanking all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here on this special occasion. I'm honored to be a part of this community at this truly stellar institution, Boston University. And I'm honored to be celebrating this path-breaking and visionary gift among this circle of friends and colleagues. Of course, I also want to give a special thanks to a few people. It's actually, I should warn you, it's more than a few people who have played an important role in my life. I first want to extend my sincerest thanks to President Bob Brown and Provost Jean Morrison for their outstanding leadership of Boston University and for their steadfast support of me in my service as dean. Stop breaking up. I thought it would stop by now, but maybe not. And thank you, of course, to Provost Jean Morrison for naming me the Ryan Rothgallow and Ernest J. Gallo Professor of Law. This professorship is a tremendous honor that I carry with great pride and responsibility. I want to thank university trustees, president of the board, Kenneth Feld, I saw him, and Tony Leatherberry for their presence and support of both the law school and their amazing colleague, Ryan Rothgallow, and her dear husband, Ernest J. Gallo. I also want to thank BU Law alumni who are present for their support, and BU Law alumni in general for their support. And in particular, I want to thank Dean's Advisory Board members who are here, Tony Gomes, Chief Justice Rebecca Martinez, and Dan Merenberg. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that I stand on the shoulders of all those who came before me in the legal profession in general. And at Boston University School of Law in particular, I thank my predecessor deans, with noted thanks to Maureen O'Rourke, the first woman law dean at BU. I'm especially grateful for the work of Black women pioneers like Congresswoman Barbara Jordan from the class of 1959, and Polly Murray, a former lecturer of law at BU, whom both litigation greats and Supreme Court Justices Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg credited as being the architect of the arguments that led to their most well-known victories. And for women law faculty like Professor Tamar Frankel and Fran Miller, who all helped to break down barriers to open up pathways for other women and people of color like me at BU Law. And I'm particularly grateful for the presence of my BU Law faculty and staff colleagues and my dear friends in the Boston area from my other life, many of whom are trailblazers themselves and who have braved a pandemic to join us today. Friends like Judge Nancy Gertner and Justice Margot Botsford. I wish I could mention everybody. Dean Ebony Nelson of the University of Connecticut School of Law. My dear law school classmate, Rebecca Ponticus, and her husband, Warren Brown. Thank you all, and a number of my colleagues from Harvard Law School and Suffolk Law School, in some cases friends from way back in the day, Guy Charles, Lolita Darden, Ken Mack and his amazing wife, Lisa Jones, Ruth Akedeji, Delia Umana, and David Wilkins. Naturally, I would like to extend my sincerest thanks to people who worked hard to bring this wonderful event to fruition. In particular, Zach Dubin, Jeremy Thompson, Michaela Doherty, Brooke Blasey, Brett Parrish, Christine Wynn, Michael Shirlante, Christina Capadora, and Deshaun Hedrickson and his team in Let's. And I'm delighted to extend my absolute warmest thanks to my dear friend, fellow dean, and collaborator on the Law Dean's Anti-Racist Clearinghouse Project, Kim Mutcherson. Thank you for making me cry in front of everybody. And thank you for the many ways in which you use your voice to lift others up. You always inspire. Of course, I would be truly remiss if I failed to give my utmost thanks to God and to the most important people in my life, my family. No one reaches any point of success without the assistance and support of their loved ones, and I certainly could not do anything I do without Jacob Willig Onwuachi, my husband, my best friend for 30 years, and the person who's been my primary source of love and support throughout my career, and truly any honor that I receive is also an honor for him. I must thank my mother, Veronica Onwuachi, who could not be here, but who taught me about love and the value of education and hard work. And I have to thank my in-laws, Susan and David Willig, for their love and support. And I have to thank my children, my sons, Elijah and Solomon, who are here, and my daughter, Bethany, who's away at college. All of my children have taught me so much about myself and about the world. They challenge me to be a better person, and they serve as my daily inspiration. Last, but certainly not least, I have to thank my friend and the Vice President of Boston University's Board of Trustees, Ryan Rothgallow, and Ernest J. Gallo for their generosity and their commitment to the School of Law. And I embarrass you throughout the speech, so we'll be forwarding. I especially want to thank them for making such a bold and visionary gift, one that truly follows in the BU Law tradition. As you all know, when the founders of BU Law decided to create this institution nearly 150 years ago in 1872, they decided to break with the social norms of the time, and open an inclusive rather than an exclusive law school by admitting qualified students regardless of gender, race, and religion. That bold and brave decision made us one of only a few law schools that can claim that our doors have always been open to everyone. And because of you, Ryan and Ernes, BU Law is once again leading the way with courage and vision through your endowment of this historic professorship, the first professorship or chair in the field of critical race theory. It wasn't long ago that the term critical race theory was virtually unknown outside of academic circles. Today, however, it is a political lightning rod. In June 2020, Fox News mentioned critical race theory 3 whole times. But by June 2021, the very same Fox News had mentioned critical race theory more than 900 times. And if I were guessing, about 800 of those 900 times include a quote that I gave to the Boston Globe on critical race theory. Okay, it's not 800 times, but you get my point. It would be fair to say that a full-scale attack has been launched against critical race theory with a claim that the field is divisive and even un-American. In fact, this summer, Citizens for Renewing America, an advocacy organization founded by a former Trump administration official, released an A to Z guide on how to stop critical race theory in your community and reclaim your local school board. Unsurprisingly, the guide mischaracterizes critical race theory as a radical theology that will, quote, socially replace, unquote, white people. To advance their cause, organizations like Citizens for Renewing America and their adherents are using the same old playbook, mobilizing followers by stoking fear. For example, consider this quote from the guide, proclaiming that critical race theory scholars contend that, quote, straight white people, children included, are inherently and irredeemably racist and benefit from, as well as systemically rig all the social institutions, rules, laws, and norms that white people invented and keep in place for their own disproportionate success and in order to maintain their own stranglehold on power, end quote. Unfortunately, efforts by groups like these are gaining steam. During the first half of this year, 126 recall initiatives were launched against school board members, more than any other group of elected officials. Additionally, more than half of the states in this nation have introduced bills or have taken other steps to restrict teachers from discussing racism, not simply critical race theory, but racism in the classroom, and a dozen have already enacted laws to that effect. In this cultural context, it takes audacity, it takes courage, and it takes resolve to propose establishing the nation's first endowed professorship in critical race theory. Ryan Rothgallow and Ernest J. Gallo are audacious and courageous and determined and strong. By funding the Gallo Professorship, Ryan and Ernest are publicly acknowledging that critical race theory is worthy of study, worthy of research and scholarship, and worthy of teaching, not only today, but for future generations. Speaking with BU Today earlier this year, Ryan said, quote, our country needs new and innovative ideas about how to meet the ideal of equal justice for all. It is our hope that providing an endowed chair will bring to the forefront these new ideas that will lead to changes that promote justice for all, end quote. At its best, philanthropy can be visionary. The Ryan Rothgallow and Ernest J. Gallo Professorship is a prime example. With their gift, Ryan and Ernest underscore the critical need to examine the ways in which structural racism shapes every facet of our society and to educate students and future leaders about its effects. And with this gift, Ryan and Ernest envision how this work will contribute to meaningful change in our society. And this change is desperately needed. Despite the laudable ideals expressed by this nation's founders, racism has been deeply embedded in our society since this nation's founding. Over the course of US history, laws have been routinely written, enacted, and interpreted by those in power in ways that have enabled and legitimated continued discrimination and violence against people of color, and that have reinforced the status quo. In fact, as Ryan pointed out so beautifully in her speech. Arguably, one of the reasons that the laws and policies of the United States have continued to reinforce structural racism is that the legal profession remains among the least diverse professions, with non-Latinx white people representing 86% of attorneys. So just like BU Law's founders, one of my highest priorities is to diversify the legal profession, starting right here at BU Law. And I'm thrilled to report that this fall, we enrolled with our amazing admissions team, led by Alyssa Leonard, the most racially and ethnically diverse class in our history, with 41% of our 1L students identifying as people of color. Beginning with next year's entering class, we'll be introducing the new Aspire program in partnership with the Center for Anti-Racist Research. Aspire stands for Anti-Racist Scholars for Progress, Innovation, and Racial Equity. The program will provide full tuition scholarships for 8 students who demonstrate a commitment to anti-racism and social justice, and will offer Aspire students a series of trainings in anti-racism and a paid 1-semester internship with the Center for Anti-Racist Research, which is led by founding director, Mellon professor, and MacArthur genius, Ibram Kendi, and Law's very own Jasmine Gonzalez-Rose, the deputy director for policy and research at the center. This program builds on several other steps that we've taken over the past 3 years to advance a culture of equity, inclusion, and belonging at the law school. And we're going beyond BU Law to address the lack of equity and inclusion in the legal academy and in the profession as a whole. In 2019, we led with the leadership of Associate Dean Ana de Robelant. We convened law faculty from across the country to examine how the canonical first-year curriculum in law schools helps to reinforce racism and oppression. We've also expanded our hugely popular In Real Law program to other Boston area law schools, inviting students of color and first-generation professionals to hear and learn from practicing attorneys about how to navigate their identities in the workplace and thrive in the profession. And earlier this year, you heard about from Dean Mutcherson about our work on the Anti-Racist Clearinghouse, a resource aimed at enabling other law schools to pursue an anti-racist agenda. Critical race theory informs all of these efforts, and it's central to my current scholarship, which I've been asked to reflect on very briefly at this event. And as I was thinking about my creative work throughout my career, I realized that community, the inequalities that certain communities face, and the impact of certain laws and events on different communities were major themes in my scholarship, service, and teaching. I realized that whether I was involved in bringing together groups of scholars for academic conferences and workshops, or whether I was assisting and mentoring junior faculty in my service work, or whether I was challenging students to ask questions about the facts that often go unanalyzed in cases, or pushing students to think about the impact of decisions and policies on often forgotten communities while teaching, or whether in my scholarship I was revealing how Justice Thomas's jurisprudence was influenced by the communities from which he came, or whether I was showing how implicit bias and assumptions about the texture of what professional-looking hair appears like can result in race and gender discrimination for Black people in their workplace communities, or whether I was exposing how law and social norms work together to push interracial families in a type of placelessness among many communities. I, as a scholar, have always been immersed in questions about the difference that we can make in using law to build, shape, and define communities, the communities we find ourselves in. And in my most recent work, I've been examining the impact of police and quasi-police killings of Black Americans, as well as the social and legal meanings of the acquittals and non-indictments that frequently follow these killings on our communities, and in particular on Black communities. I examined the emergence of cultural trauma for Blacks in relation to the legal outcomes in these tragic cases. Jeffrey Alexander, a cultural sociologist, has provided one widely used definition of cultural trauma, noting that, quote, cultural trauma occurs when members of a collective feel they have been subjected to a horrendous event that leaves indelible marks upon their group consciousness, marking their memories forever and changing their future identity in fundamental and irrevocable ways. And through my research, primarily of interviews of lawyers and law students of all races and the legal outcomes about the legal outcomes in cases involving police and quasi-police killings of Blacks, I've discovered that in our current post-civil rights era, cultural trauma, meaning group-based trauma for Blacks, emerges in two distinct forms. And they emerge in two distinct forms in response to the repeated non-indictment acquittals of the police officers and quasi-police officers like neighborhood watch volunteers who kill other Blacks like Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor, and Eric Garner. The first form of cultural trauma is what I called the trauma of the routine in a 2017 sociological theory article. In that article, I was not only talking about trauma narratives, I was talking about trauma narratives that arise not only when there is a shock to the routine, a shock to what is expected as cultural sociologists had previously defined cultural trauma, but also trauma narratives that emerge when regularly expected occurrences, the matter the communities have come to expect, like acquittals of officers and quasi-police officers who kill Black people, take place and in fact get affirmed through official systems. In making my point, I utilize examples from the Emmett Till trial and the acquittal of his murderers to prove my claims, relaying how a long-standing history of discrimination and injustice had left Blacks in 1955, including Mamie Till Mobley, the mother of Emmett Till, with the expectation that the two murderers of her son on trial, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, would be acquitted. And I explained how the social meaning of that acquittal for Blacks emerged through a cultural trauma narrative that helped to ignite the civil rights movement. The second form of post-civil rights cultural trauma that my research reveals emerges for Blacks is what I'm calling the trauma of injustice. What I argue arises from a different type of shattering of the expected, a shattering of the promise and narrative of equality and justice that has become an important part of this nation's post-civil rights storyline. In fact, the response to the acquittal in this generation's Emmett Till trial, the Trayvon Martin trial, illustrates the presence of these two forms of cultural trauma among Blacks. After all, one saw a trauma of the routine narrative emerge through the voices of many Blacks who doubted that a jury would actually ever find George Zimmerman guilty, but then later experienced the pain of that expectation when the acquittal became a reality, and who had also absorbed an understanding of what that verdict meant for the value of Black life in the United States. Take, for example, this quote from Astrid Johnson, then a 39-year-old Black woman lawyer who had fully expected that George Zimmerman would be charged with a crime for killing Trayvon Martin, but who did not expect there would be a conviction. She asserted, quote, "I was not expecting anything in terms of a conviction. It was not shocking to me that he did not get convicted, but it was heartbreaking. So something can be not expected and also devastating. That's what it felt like, that nothing has changed and that I needed to be afraid. I remember listening to the announcement. It was in the evening, I think several hours after the jury had been dismissed, and police were out, and my son was a couple months old, and I remember listening to it and then walking to his bedroom while he was still asleep in his crib and just crying over his crib. It said to me, this could be my child. Nothing has changed. I've brought a young Black male into the world where someone can kill him in the street for just living, and there will be no justice for him. And this was both not surprising, but also devastating. It marked a real cynicism in my thoughts about race in the United States. Before then, I don't think I was optimistic, but I wasn't as cynical as I became after that." Explaining the impact of the repeated acquittals and non-indictments in police and quasi-police killings on her, Astrid declared, "It corrodes your sense, quote, corrodes your sense of safety. It corrodes your faith in your democracy. It corrodes relationships with people who are not willing to engage the horror of these repeated incidents. And that when you think about things like hypertension, depression, heart disease in Black communities, and I think this is a lot of it, this ambient stress that never goes away because one, you realize it could happen to you, and two, nobody around you is talking about it until there's a gaslighting effect of it, right? Like, I know this thing is happening, but y'all sit around here in the coffee room like it's a normal Tuesday, right? And so I think people underestimate how much it corrodes, and the lack of sensitivity to that is a double injury on top of it. At the same time, one saw the trauma of the routine narrative emerge after the George Zimmerman verdict. One also heard and witnessed the emergence of a slightly different narrative about the trauma of injustice for Blacks. For example, people like Trayvon Martin's parents had faith that justice would be served through the conviction and imprisonment of George Zimmerman, and later expressed shock, disappointment, and dismay at the jury's decision to acquit. Take, for example, this quote from Stephanie Jenkins, a 45-year-old Black woman attorney who had previously been confident that the justice system would work appropriately and that there would be some accountability and consequence for George Zimmerman. She said about the meaning of the quote-unquote, "It meant that our justice system that we are expected to put our faith in to resolve our grievances on behalf of us as citizens, our legitimate grievances, was not available to me as a Black citizen. It just did not work for me. It meant we also can't engage in self-help because that's going to get us in trouble. Again, it's this overwhelming powerlessness. It's what are you supposed to do? What options are you left with? You can't protect them, you can't vindicate them, you can't vindicate yourself. How are you supposed to exist in that world?" It just felt so incredibly unfair, so frustrating, so overwhelmingly, like I said, it was just completely disempowering. It's not just that juries acquit, it's that prosecutors fail to charge, it's that police officers cover up, that the media spins by finding a joint in a bag or finding a tape that says maybe he did something. I don't know. At this point, I guess I'm grappling with that reality. And in this current project, I argue that in today's society, it is in many ways more this shattering of the post-civil rights narrative, this trauma of injustice narrative, rather than an affirmation of the historical exclusion and the trauma of the routine that disrupts African Americans' sense of belonging as full citizens of the United States. Support from the Ryan Roth Gallo and Ernest J. Gallo Professorship is precisely what enables me to advance this scholarship, and it ensures that future scholars at BU Law will contribute further to critical race theory. Endowed professorships like these are important for several reasons. First, much like the Gallo Professorship does, it reinforces core institutional values within our own community and for the public. Second, it establishes an institutional commitment to a particular area of scholarship in perpetuity, which the Gallo Professorship does so importantly. Lastly, endowed professorships are an important tool for attracting and retaining top faculty, and I hope others in this room will follow the Gallo's lead and establish other endowed professorships at the law school. Of course, Ryan and Ernest's generosity also underscores the tremendous value that our alumni contribute to our community. Financial gifts of all kinds, small and large, are incredibly important, enabling us to serve our students and our mission in ways that otherwise would not be possible. But our alumni also contribute in so many ways, like serving as mentors, hiring our graduates, and more. And I'm grateful for the wide-ranging, meaningful support for from so many of our alumni. I'm also honored to serve as Dean of Boston University School of Law. And today of all days, I'm so very proud to be the Ryan Roth Gallo and Ernest J. Gallo Professor of Law. Again, I would like to thank President Brown, Provost Morrison, and the university trustees for their support. Given that critical race theory is highly controversial due to inflammatory rhetoric and disinformation campaigns, not every university would welcome an endowed professorship in critical race theory at this time. So thank you very much for your commitment to the production of knowledge in this area. Once again, I'm extremely grateful to Ryan Roth Gallo and Ernest Gallo for their extraordinary support for BU Law and for me personally. I feel fortunate to call you both friends. Ryan recently said to BU Today, every law school now wants to claim that it values diversity, inclusion, and equity, but BU walks the walk. Importantly, we at BU are able to walk the walk because of alumni like Ryan and friends like her husband, Ernest, who support us in making that walk with their resources, with their support, their courage, and their willingness to join us in that walk. Thank you very much to both of you. Finally, I want to thank everyone here for taking time out of your busy schedules for sitting through that long talk. Thank you for joining us for the ceremony on this beautiful Saturday morning. I'm thankful to be a member of this community, and I'm grateful for your presence.